The Hyperspace. Podcasting in the 25th Century presents
Cloning It In. Welcome, podcast pioneers, to Cloning It In, our analysis and discussion of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. My name is Jared.
My name's Matt.
And I'm Mike.
So guys, we're bringing Cloning It In out of retirement.
How cool is that? I'm thrilled we get to do another Cloning It In. I thought that was retired and put down for good.
Well,
no,
it is not, because this show, if nothing else, is basically a direct sequel to the Clone Wars.
Yeah. What a great bridge show this is too, you know?
Yes.
Carry us over into A New Hope.
Agreed. Before we get started,
yes.
now,
Do we?
No. I'm going to tell you now. I've automated the spoiler alert. I've stopped using living beings.
Oh, okay.
The elf and the monkey, it was all bad. So
It got bad.
I have an automated spoiler alert on my phone. So we're going to give this a shot and see how it works.
This is foolproof.
Completely.
All right.
Here we go.
All right.
And 3, 2, 1, spoiler alert.
I should buy
Well,
Okay.
I guess that wasn't quite the alarm, but
Let me...
you know what? Just do it manual. Just do it yourself.
Hold on. Here.
All right.
Play spoiler alert. Okay,
So we're spoiling everything. If you haven't seen The Bad Batch, it's on you because we're going to spoil everything right now.
actually everything in the first 8 episodes.
First 8 episodes.
This is the halfway mark of the season, so we're going to be talking about everything that's happened up until now.
Mhm.
And then hopefully at the end of the season, we will do the rest of the
recap.
and we'll talk about more then. But hey, so we start with an episode called Aftermath. And
Yeah, that's like a mini movie by itself.
yeah, it was a 74-minute episode. And it was pretty great. It was a good start. I think what surprised me is that, as we saw in the last few episodes of the Clone Wars, the events in these episodes take place concurrently with Revenge of the Sith.
Mhm.
And we get to see, once again, Order 66 from a different perspective.
Yeah. And we got a little extra special on this Order 66. Who do we see at the at the mercy of the clones here?
We see a teenage Caleb Doom, a.k.a. Kanan from Rebels, who has a very husky, deep voice.
Yeah, I thought so too.
His voice is... He's already well into puberty, obviously.
Well, he was ahead of the game, you know.
Yeah.
That's what helped him survive. He could blend in better. But yeah, we see his master. What was his master's name?
Her name was Depa Balaba.
Yeah. So she died trying to protect him, and we see his escape from Order 66, which is really cool that they hit that connective tissue for us. You know, if you're a fan of Rebels, you know you'll get a kick out of that a little bit.
Yeah. You see that if you remember from Rebels, Kanan had a distrust of Rex when Rex joined the team, just because even though Hunter lets him go, he still feels very betrayed by what has happened. And it's during this sequence where one of the Bad Batch, there seems to be some fractures forming.
Yeah, well, I mean, we kind of see in the whole, well, at least up to this point, the Bad Batch they're not immune to Order 66, but they're not being affected like the other clones.
Correct.
And for some, it's more immediate, and for others, it's more of a degenerative thing. And some, it seems like it doesn't affect them at all. But for some reason, their genetic modifications in the cloning process has kind of interfered with the chip that they all have implanted inside of them. for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch their dynamic with the other clones too, because they don't know what's going on, and they're all of a sudden on the outside of this whole thing, and they make an immediate on the spot choice on how they're going to react to this, which is a crazy thing to think. I mean, I can't imagine being put in that position where a second before everybody's on the same team, and then the next second for some reason you're by yourself, and it's really clever that we got to see it from that perspective, Order 66, because Order 66 was always kind of like it was always out there, but to see it on the ground level happening like this, from the clones' perspective, is pretty great stuff.
I would totally agree with that.
Before we get into any like real big details here, D. Bradley Baker, who voices the clones,
yes,
he voices all of the clones.
Yes,
he voices every voice in the Bad Batch. I read a pretty cool. He's an amazing voice actor. And I read a pretty cool little piece of trivia on him. So right now, he is the top voice actor as far as how many characters he has voiced in his career. So he holds the record for the most amount of voiced characters from like the Pirates. He did the parrot on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, the update. So even that is a part of his character. But like this guy is prolific and he's amazing. But I didn't even realize. For some reason, it didn't occur to me that he did all the voices of the Bad Batch.
Yeah,
it's just really
how does he keep it straight? I mean, like, oh wait, no, that's how Crosshair talks. No, this is Hunter. Whoa, maybe this is Wrecker has a very distinct voice, but
that one I think. But like, there's some that are really like, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. But it's just such a talent, and it's just to watch that show, knowing that he's doing all these voices, it just makes it that much cooler for me. But anyways,
yeah, absolutely.
I digress. Back in the weeds.
So after this happens, the Bad Batch, they're not ostracized immediately. They're just like, okay, well, we need to get back to Kamino and figure out what's happening here. And they have a lot more autonomy than it seems like the other clones do, obviously, because they got their own ship. They can kind of just come and go as they please. And they head back to Kamino. And on Kamino, there's a lot of interesting things happening. Our good friend Tarkin is there. And they're talking about something which I found very interesting. With the Empire now ascendant, do we need to be paying for these clones anymore? Because I imagine clones are expensive. Do we forget this and just start using recruits? Which has always, to me, been a very interesting question. And something that's kind of floated out there since the prequel trilogy has really taken root in the lore of Star Wars. Like, are the Stormtroopers clones in the original trilogy? Well, no, they're not. And we see the genesis of this in this show, which I really enjoy. And we are introduced to Omega. Omega? Hunter? Rix? Echo?
Amigo?
Full disclosure, I was, when the later trailer started dropping, I was like, oh, well, of course there's a kid in it. Of course there's a kid. Why wouldn't there be? But, I have a very short memory because, Dave Filoni brought us this show, and he was also responsible for Ahsoka and characters like Ezra and, other kid characters which drew scorn initially characters that I came to enjoy quite a bit. And I think Omega, for me personally, she has grown on me like the fastest of Ahsoka and like Ezra. I thought in the first few episodes it started to teeter on, well, is this kid going to save the day every time? But I think she's a very well done and likable character. And the relationship that they've forged with her, like a very kind of her and Hunter with like a father-daughter bond almost, I think it's pretty genuine and sweet, and it's very well done in the show, I think, and not like overblown or like jammed down your throat. It's kind of natural and realistic. Mike, what do you think about that? Being a father of 2 young kids, do you think those relationships are portrayed in a realistic manner on the show?
Well, I think it's a little different because the unusualness of it is you have a young female with a ship full of men, which is could be you're kind of skating on some very uncomfortable type scenarios. But I think that they're handling it well. Of course, the characters have all kind of become like fathers to her, and they each offer a different personality, which they kind of interact with her a little differently. It seems like Heavy, is that the big one?
Wrecker.
Yeah. He seems to be the one that, because he's the most childlike. They seem to be bonding together in a very very nice relationship. And like you said, it did at the beginning. It was going to be like, I think there was like the first or the second episode, she pulled them out of the fire or saved them somehow. I can't remember specifically. Maybe there was a couple, but I think she isn't like, she is learning, so she's not like you do get a sense of she's in danger when she's in these scenarios. And I think also the other thing about her character is they've kind of like brought in some revelations regarding her that make her intriguing, as far as, she's not just some, oh, here's a girl, she feels like she now feels like a part of the Star Wars mythos. As far as,
I agree with that.
As far as her importance to the story. So, at the beginning, and you're always fearful whenever you see a small character brought into a show. Like you said, we saw Ahsoka, Ezra, and those all turned into really great characters. And I don't think I was, but also, how much. Also, I think the thing with Bad Batch was how much was Filoni involved, because he's listed as an executive producer. And you kind of got the sense that with him working on The Mandalorian, he wouldn't be as hands-on with this. But it feels like it's got his stench on it. So I don't know how much involvement he has, or if he's just picked the right people. But the show literally, it feels like the Clone Wars. It feels like it just is like segued straight into the Clone Wars. There's like no difference at all in quality, and the animation's exactly the same. It's just like a Clone Wars B.
Yeah.
Not to keep you're talking about Omega, because there's a lot of different great points in the show, but Mike had a good point. One of the good things about Omega as a character is that she's a good device to have the Bad Batch bounce off of, because
she's like a straight man.
Well, when we met the Bad Batch in the last season of the Clone Wars, they were what they were. They were an elite fracture group from the clones that were sent in to do special missions, and they had little comedy bits about them, how they interacted with each other, and Wrecker, especially the comic relief. But they were a specialized unit, and they were good soldiers, and that's how we start this season with the Bad Batch. But what she gets to do is she gets to bring a little bit of the humanity into the clones. They're just not soldiers. They're just not this elite unit. And she starts to bring out those other aspects, relatable aspects from them, which makes them, more like a regular person.
Not caricatures, but actual characters.
Exactly. And as Mike said, they've not just made her a cheap device. They've given her a real good backstory now. And it's a backstory that if you're a Star Wars fan, you're already really fascinated by. And there are theories going all over the interwebs right now about what this means to the future. Why is she like this? And we can spoil it right now. What makes Omega different and she makes her special is that she, like Boba Fett, is a unaltered clone from the DNA of Jango Fett.
She's Boba's sister.
And also, there's a revelation with Boba is his designation is Alpha.
He's Alpha. So the Alpha and the Omega, the only two that exist apparently from the original DNA. So she's a hot commodity, especially for the
Caminos.
the Caminans.
I say Kaminoans, but
Kaminoans. That sounds good. This is like their top asset that they need back for a lot of different reasons.
Apparently the original material, I guess, whatever, is not useful, and they need Omega because it's a more pure form of Django's DNA, I guess. But
yeah.
So the Bad Batch got off in their own. They took off. They took Omega with them, and they're on the run. So and we're seeing we see it in this first 8 episodes
from one of their own. They're on the run from one of their own.
Exactly. They're
Crosshair has said, "I'm not doing this crap with you."
Crosshair is full Order 66. He is Imperial to the core now. And we see that Wrecker is having a lot of headaches. He's having problems too. And every episode it just gets progressively worse, and you can kind of infer that he's not far off from turning. And by the way, when that moment happens, I think is one of my favorite moments in the Bad Batch so far up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
The way they did it, the way they cut the music, the way they cut the sound. When his eyes open up and he's full-blown Order 66 Imperial,
mm-hmm.
that's a fun moment.
And I thought it was interesting, too, because I was wondering, what would happen if Wrecker turned? Because I didn't know if there's no Jedi around, what's he going to do? But it turns out he is also programmed to turn on traitors to the Empire, which are clones who don't do what they're supposed to do. And so he immediately starts to target his friends or his brothers.
And we saw, that whole sequence, by the way, was really spectacular because they were in a scrapped Jedi starship freighter. What planet were they on?
It was Braca.
And it was the same planet that was featured in one of the video games.
Yeah, in Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of fun to see. And that was a great episode, too. A lot of action.
Mm-hmm.
You got to see a lot of the ins and outs of the ship. I love them going into the engine to try and escape that whole sequence.
Oh, yeah. That was great.
This show delivers the visuals that you want if you're a Star Wars fan. For me, it's the gritty Star Wars that I really like. It's what The Mandalorian gives me. It's what Rebels kind of gave me. But this is that gritty time frame, which is my favorite time frame of Star Wars.
Yeah. It's the law. We're just, you got to think, we're probably just a few months after Revenge of the Sith now in the timeline. But you can already see, like, the Imperial aesthetic has almost completely, like, taken over. Everybody, they're wearing the olive drab uniforms, and the clone troopers look like they did in Episode 3, but they're all white now. There's not really there's no special paint, there's no customization. They all look like Stormtroopers.
Right.
So
I think at some point they're going to have to ditch their armor.
Well, yeah, because
it's just
it's
too recognized. It's almost like that's one of the, I guess that would be one of the things about the show is when they go out in public, it seems like they should stick out a little more than they do.
Well, if you remember, like in the second episode when they're trying to get the clone refugee Cut and his family off that planet, like all these dudes are clones walking around together, and Hunter or Cut just sort of like moves his hat down a little bit, like, "Hey, no, I'm not a clone."
But that said, they all do look a little different than the standard clone.
I think Wrecker obviously has a lot of physical differences, and goggles, Tech. Tech looks. He's much slighter and slimmer. He's built a lot like Crosshair is, but Echo, of course, he's a reg.
Original.
He's a reg.
But he's
borged out and jacked up. Right. And so I would imagine, like, of the two, probably, Hunter probably looks like Tamora Morrison. But
also he's got that very distinguishable tattoo on his face.
On his face, yes.
And he wears the red headband. If there's a poster of this guy anywhere, he never tries to hide his identity and how he looks.
No. I mean, okay, he looks like Rambo with a big black tattoo on his face.
Yeah.
So,
and the Bad Batch wound up. Life is hard, and when you have a starship, you got to be able to fuel the thing. You have to pay for fuel, and they got to go places. So they wind up getting in the service of what's her name, Sid, who's I guess a Trandoshan.
She's a Trandoshan.
She's a little squat Trandoshan, and when she opened her mouth, I'm like, okay,
it's Carla.
A little bit.
It's Carla.
Yeah, I'm like, it's a little bit over the top, but the character really grew on me, and I actually and I think the interaction between her and the Bad Batch is great.
Yeah.
Anytime she's on camera, I think she's great. But they become basically employed by the bondsman. And they're doing bounties, and they become bounty hunters to pay for fuel and basically to pay her debt because she kind of saved them from the Empire.
Well,
hid them away.
And I got to say, I think it's interesting that that's not something you really ever thought about in Star Wars before. Like, well, where do they get their food and their fuel? Yeah. I mean, how do they... So this is actually directly addressing that, where Hunter's like, hey, the Republic's not feeding us and fueling us anymore, and we have to figure out how to do that. And I thought that was very interesting. And the fact that they went to the kind of the underworld, that's also a very Star Wars thing to do.
Yeah.
I thought one of their first missions, chasing down a Rancor for a certain Hutt crime lord was pretty inventive.
It's like a mini origin story.
What was the name of the Rancor?
Moochie.
So
Luke Skywalker kills poor Moochie? Is that what we're led to believe?
I think it's Moochie that went down.
Because Moochie was an adolescent Rancor at that time. So, 20 years later, she's...
Yeah.
Man,
full grown.
That's crazy.
Moochie. Poor Mooch.
But I thought that was pretty amusing. And we also have had the first appearance or return of Fennec Shand.
That's right. Voiced by
Ming-Na Wen.
By Ming-Na.
And we find out later from another favorite, Cad Bane, that she's new to the game, which makes sense. If you extrapolate Ming-Na's actual age, which is an unbelievable 57 years old, and go backwards from that, she would be
crazy.
Like at the time of The Mandalorian, if she's 57, then she would be in her late 20s.
35.
In her late 20s, I guess, something about that.
So we don't know who sent Fennec, though. We haven't found that out.
Yeah,
right?
Fennec Shand was hired by the Kaminoans
by one specific. Yeah, because they want her dead.
So,
but her ward, I guess, or whatever, is trying to save her life.
I believe her name is Nala Se, and Tan Wei, who was an actual character that appeared in episode 2.
We've been expecting you.
Yes, she was actually killed on this show in one of the recent episodes. So,
and that was a great episode. We got to see a satellite facility for the cloners.
Yes,
like there was like a whole Cloud City complex that they had abandoned or what their deal was, but they still had things in the tank.
Yeah,
well, that's a good time to bring up something I was going to bring up is like with Rebels, it felt like they'd kind of like got a little chintzy on the animation, but it feels like they're back to just going all out. And
no doubt about it.
Rebels, I always thought the characters were a little juvenile, but like things like the starships in
the starships look cool, but everything looked very simple to me. And this one it's got a lot of texture, like Jared pointed out. The water on the ship planet, the cloud stuff.
Clouds
looked, like real clouds.
There are moments in this show where it looks like it's live action.
Yeah,
I mean, especially when you're focusing on spaceships and environments. It's and like we said earlier, the fact that they're continuing on with the Clone Wars aesthetic. I mean, just it is the same show design wise as the Clone Wars is.
Oh yeah.
But Yeah, that weird abandoned Cloud City Cloud City type of Camino facility was really strange, but cool.
So were those Caminos, or was that another?
You know
hint
what?
At, the Snoke.
I think they looked very Kaminoan-ish to me.
Well, they were actually I think we found the origin of the aliens from Signs. I think that's what that
Yeah.
was.
It looked too big to be one, but I have to go back and watch it. I only saw it the one time.
It was but that was really strange, and I don't know if there was it was hard to make out if those were different species in each tank.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
go
what
back
it
and
could
watch.
be, because if you think about it, there'd be no reason for a Snoke, because that's when Palpatine's just getting revved up.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
Who
sure.
knows? I mean,
Well-
but it's great to see that kind of stuff. And again, they're opening up the Star Wars universe and filling in the white space with some pretty cool visuals and some new places. And they're getting a little original. They're giving us stuff that you don't expect, which is fun.
Mhm.
And season 7 of the Clone Wars was top notch. And so far, Bad Batch has been just as good, if not more entertaining, because it's taking you past the point where you remember where you left off.
Yeah.
And they are going into, the new ground here, and they're not existing in the same space. Now they're moving forward and they're filling in the space for us finally. So
Yeah.
the story is really, becoming big and important, and it's really feeling like this is the part that you've been waiting to find out. This is leading up to A New
Yeah.
Hope. These are all the great things that they're giving you. And this, look, people have their ups and downs with what Disney's producing with Star Wars, but there's stuff like this that, the Star Wars fans, The Mandalorian, this kind of stuff, Rogue One, there's good stuff coming out of Disney. For as much questionable stuff, I think there's just as much good stuff. And, this is solid gold. And that they're really dialed in now, I think, to the Star Wars fan. The Mandalorian, I think Rogue One was great, but The Bad Batch, this is, if you're a Star Wars core fan, this stuff is right up your alley.
And I'll tell you this, with what's coming up with Book of Boba Fett, there's going to be Boba Fett is going to be in this show before this season is over. I am predicting that because
I'm going to
imagine.
predict we see an older Omega in Mandalorian.
or Book of Boba Fett. That's on the table. I mean, I think you're right because, why aren't the Kaminoans, if they're spending all this time and energy to get Omega, Boba Fett is still out there. And Boba Fett, I mean, he's the alpha. So, and I think we are going to see Boba Fett and Omega meet. He's going to meet his sister at some point, and I don't know if he's going to be pleased that he has one. I wonder if he knows about her.
Yeah, who knows?
So there's all kinds of questions that are being asked here, and it's just like that's like Matt's saying. It's great storytelling because it's despite the fact that the show is supposedly focused on this small group of outlaw clones, the story here is going to have bigger ripples, I think, throughout the Star Wars saga, which is, and it's going to add to the lore in like meaningful and cool ways, which is what the best Star Wars always does.
I mean, like The Mandalorian, I think we're pretty lucky to have this show. I mean, it's good stuff, and it's not silly stuff. It's like you feel like you're in important Star Wars stuff here.
Because there are people, I made it halfway through that Resistance show, and let me tell you,
I didn't watch it.
Let me tell you, that was some like 1985 droids level junk they were putting out, and I am just glad that there are people working at Lucasfilm that can make the Bad Batch in spite of something like Resistance. So
it's been a good first half so far. I can't. I mean, it's going to be a roller coaster finishing this up with 8 more episodes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. So far, top marks I think for me. And also, I just listened to the soundtrack that they've released. And it's a great, just standalone listen. I would Kevin Kiner still doing the music. I think it's a good mix of synth and some orchestra. But if you like Star Wars music, it's definitely it's top tier stuff. So,
Great. Well, we're gonna wrap up our bonus episode of the Clone Wars.
cloning.
At least we get to do one more of these. Pretty excited here.
Yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed this special Cloning It In on Monday, but we'll be back with normal episodes from the hyperspace every Monday. We're still in season 4. We got a lot more stuff to come. So subscribe and let everyone know.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to the Hyperspace Podcasting in the 25th Century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us next time as we take you into the 25th century.